أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وأفضل الصلوات وأتم التسليم على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب قلوبنا وطبيب نفوسنا أبي القاسم محمد وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا اللهم صل على Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. We know for a fact that in the madrasa of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, there are so many things that we can learn. We know that the everlasting message of Imam Hussein alayhi salam is something that has always evolved throughout history. No matter how much we talk about this mission, the message of Imam Hussein, no matter how long we delve into the different dimensions of the revolution of Imam Hussein, there are still things that we can discover and learn from the ultimate sacrifice that Sayyid al-Shuhada alayhi salam gave. Our focus in these nights is on the moral, akhlaqi aspects of the revolution of Imam Hussein. And what were the teachings of Imam Hussein for his followers in order for them to truly represent the message of Islam? We know as Muslims that year in, year out, day in, day out, there are so many things that we perform that could be in line with the teachings of our religion and could not be in line with the teachings of our religion. We had mentioned that ultimately the goal of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sending down prophets was akhlaq. Innama, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi himself has said, Innama bu'ithtu li'utammima makarim al-akhlaq. I was sent down for the purpose of completing and perfecting aspects of akhlaq. When we say that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi kana khuluquhu al-Qur'an, when we say that according to one statement, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi has himself asked his followers, takhallaqu bi akhlaqillah, for us to adopt the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and implement them in our moral behavior. That standard of living that we have will most certainly elevate, and we will be those perfect beings that every single one of us anticipates to be. Without doubt, what Imam Hussein alayhi salam done in his reform uprising was for this very purpose. We have mentioned more than once that Imam Hussein alayhi salam tolerated a lot during the era of Muawiyah's government. But there was nothing that would allow him to justify that action of him commencing a revolution against the people. Or the government, did Imam Hussein alayhi salam, in what it is that he done by traveling from Medina al-Munawwara to Makkah al-Mukarramah, then from Makkah al-Mukarramah heading towards Kufa, did he do that as a military revolution? Was his aim to have a battle against the army of Yazid? Was the objective that he had to carry arms against the government at the time? What I'm trying to say is the objective that Imam Hussein, was it a military objective? If it was, then how could he involve his family members, young children, women, in the military battle that he wanted to commence? If it was the case that it was a military revolution, then Was he not outnumbered by many to one? How many were they in the army of Imam Hussein alayhi salam in comparison to that of Yazid? If we were to take the least number, we would say 30,000. But narrations have reached up to 100 and 120,000. So that wouldn't be a sensible thing for a person to do, being outnumbered, whether it be horsemen, whether it be warriors, whether it be whatever else it may have been at the time. And therefore, we have no option other than to refer back to Imam Hussein alayhi salam himself and the teachings of Imam Hussein, his statements as to why did he revolt against Yazid. Why did he not revolt against Muawiyah? Yazid is the son of Muawiyah. Yazid was in the government for a year. He tried many ways to convince Imam Hussein to pledge allegiance and do bay'ah to Yazid. Yazid continued to refuse. He said, the likes of me will never do bay'ah to the likes of him. The difference here, one of the differences, is that Muawiyah was a very sly and cunning person. Everything he committed as far as sinful acts are concerned were concealed. They were hidden. Never did he do them out there in the open. He brought about that animosity and hatred towards Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, but never was it done out there in the public. If it was the case that Imam Hussein alayhi salam had made these certain statements, and if it was the case that he had explained to his followers as to why it is that he commenced this uprising, he himself called it a demand for reform. Talabul Islah. Talabul Islah fi ummati jaddi Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi. He did not revolt or lead that reform movement for the sake of being the Khalifa. His father, his elder brother already endured all of those things that they went through. He himself makes that very clear, that the one and only purpose of me doing this is for the sake of demanding a change in the ummah of my grandfather. Muawiyah would do certain things that would bring about that hatred. For example, he would give a little baby goat to a little child and say, this is from Muawiyah, his henchmen, of course. And then that little child will get very attached to the baby goat. The baby goat grows, the child also grows. Then those same henchmen would come and kill the goat in front of that child that grew up with the goats, with the sheep, whatever it may have been. Of course, and then they would say, this was by the command of Ali ibn Abi Talib. What would that child grow up having? Nothing other than hatred and animosity. And this is why that sunnah of cursing Imam Ali alayhi salam came into practice. This is why overwhelming of majority of people were even surprised that Imam Ali was killed in a masjid. They were saying, what was Imam Ali doing? What was Ali ibn Abi Talib doing in a masjid, let alone him being killed in a masjid? This was the plight that the Muslim ummah were going through. We can say 70%, 80% of Islam was buried during the time of Muawiyah, and worse happened during the time of Yazid. The difference is, with Yazid, he was doing it publicly. He no longer had that shamefulness of trying to conceal it from the public eye of the Muslim Ummah. His audacity had no boundaries, no limits. And so he was doing all of these things in public, drinking and this and that and all that debauchery and wickedness and corruption was there in the public eye. Imam Hussein alayhi salam had to do something about it. That level of amr bil ma'roof wa nahi anil munkar led him to say, well, I have a group of people who are in Kufa. All of them are requesting hundreds of letters he received. All of them and requests, all of them are asking me to come to Kufa and start with this reform movement. We call it revolution, not in the contemporary sense, because the connotation of revolution straight away would lead someone to think that it is a military revolution. The revolution and the uprising of Imam Hussein alayhi salam was a humanitarian uprising and revolution. It was an insani uprising and revolution. He wanted to reform the qulub, the hearts. This is why he done what he done by taking his family members. He said, this is what Islam truly represents. It's me, the grandson of the prophets. It is Zainab. It is these family members that were the closest in kin to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi, who founded Islam. The same way as on the day of Mubahala, and all of you know the story about Mubahala, the same events of Mubahala, where they were going to have that event, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi brought nobody other than his daughter, her husband, and her 2 children. Imam Hussein alayhi salam done the same thing on the opposite side of the Mubahala. They brought every single priest and holy man from the Nasara, the Christians of Najran. Imam Hussein alayhi salam didn't plead to people, please come and join us in this revolution. No, he even said, inshallah tomorrow night we're going to be speaking about this. Anyone who wants to leave, they can leave. But know that the fate that you have in this mission is nothing other than to be there on the plains of Karbala. So when we try to understand the philosophy behind the uprising of Imam Hussein and his demand for reform, we cannot understand it outside the scope of akhlaqiyat, outside the scope of building that nafs. We said what the nafs was. We said that the nafs and the different faculties that the nafs has. We also said that a person in their spiritual journey towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you want to meet God, you need to struggle. Ya ayyuhal insan, innaka kadihun. This is the ayah from the Holy Quran. Innaka kadihun ila rabbika kadhan famulaqih. You are going to need to struggle. You are struggling towards your Lord in order for you to meet Him. Liqa'ullah. Liqa'ullah can only be accomplished if someone was to have made that struggle, that kadh, that jihad, jihadun nafs, a'da aduwuk. Your worst enemy is nafsuka allati bayna jambayk, your very nafs that you have that's between you. And this is the greatest of struggles that a person needs to go through. You are on the low level of al-nafsul ammaratu bis-su', the nafs that is constantly feeding it with evil, su', badness. That's all we think about in our primary stage. We want to go up a little bit and we say, well, I know that as the more I feed my nafs with those radha'il that we spoke about yesterday and the day before of either ifrat and tafrit, it's going to continue to grow larger and larger and expand. One simple sin, which is a black dot in your heart, if left there, it will expand and expand. It's like a plague. It's contagious as well. Not only will it expand in your own heart, it will also be conveyed to the hearts of others. This is why if you stay silent to a sin that is being committed in front of you, you are partners in crime to that sin. Now, a person knows that something needs to be done. I need to elevate myself. I need to get rid of this bad trait that I have. So I start blaming my nafs. I start considering the nafs, which is that enemy that I have, to be something that needs to be nurtured. I need to discipline it. I need to make sure that I have it on the right sides. And therefore, I elevate to one more station, and that is an-nafsul lawamah, the blaming nafs. A blaming nafs is a nafs that feels guilt. We know as Muslims that if we were to wrong Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or wrong someone, it's an instinct within ourselves that we feel a level of guilt. Now, sometimes someone does something about it, sometimes someone doesn't. If you feel that guilt, you need to do something about it. Feeling that guilt means you have that conscience of you wanting to make change. That's number one. Then you turn to istighfar and tawbah. Istighfar means seeking forgiveness. Tawbah means repent, to make that reform. What's a tawbah? It is for you, after doing istighfar and seeking forgiveness, for you to pledge to yourself that you're not going to go that way anymore. If you eliminate sin one by one, and you make that pledge of tawbatan nasuha, of never returning back to that sin, then you will elevate one further level, and that is an-nafsul mutma'innah. An-nafsul mutma'innah is that nafs that is at harmony and at tranquility. Ala bi dhikrillahi tatma'innal qulub. You have that inner peace, that level of tranquility and harmony, that you have no khawf and no huzn that comes your way. You want to go a step further, and that is an-nafsul radiyah, that contents, you are happy. Then you want to go more mardiyah, then you want to go more al-kamila. And each and every station, each and every level, each and every step that you take, you are eliminating the step that is before you. But you can't skip. You cannot become all of a sudden some holy person unless you go through these levels of jihad, jihadun nafs. And when you want to learn about rida and itmi'nan and all of these stations of spiritual jihad against the nafs, and of course, يا أيتها النفس المطمئنة ارجعي إلى ربك راضية مرضية. يعني in this ayah, there are three of these stations that are already mentioned. Direction, as did the overwhelming majority of Muslims at that time, where they were all either against Imam Hussein physically, or they stayed silent in their houses. It's either you were with him or you were against him. There's no middle way. Someone came to the Imams after the event of Karbala, and they said proudly that we were there on the army of Yazid, but we didn't throw no arrow. We didn't cast no arrow. We didn't throw no spear. We did absolutely nothing. And then the statement was said, لَقَدْ كَثَّرْتَ السَّوَادَ عَلَيْنَا, that you have increased the amounts of people that were against us, even though you didn't do anything. السَّاكِتُ عَنِ الْحَقِّ شَيْطَانٌ أَخْرَسٌ. Someone who stays quiet against haqq is a mute shaitan. So there's no such thing as a fence sitter. Someone who sits on the fence and observes two sides. Well, I'm not going to take your side and I'm not going to take your side. I know you have a little bit of haqq and you also have a little bit of haqq. What is this? Unfortunately, even in today's world, we have people in some parts of the Muslim world who believe that Imam Hussein alayhi salam was wrong in him revolting against the Khalifa. And this is why they said, that qutila bi sayfi jaddih, he was killed with the sword of his grandfather. What does this mean? It means that that same principle that his grandfather had instilled into the Muslim Ummah, Imam Hussein was killed because of that. Which means that he was at fault, which they clearly say, he was at fault because he went against the Khalifa of his time. And you must obey Wulatul Amr, you must obey the guardian or the ruler of the Muslim Ummah. What's the evidence that they have for this? أطيعوا الله وأطيعوا, the ayah in the Quran, أطيعوا الله وأطيعوا الرسول وأولي الأمر منكم. Obey God, obey His Messenger, and obey Wulatul Amr, Waliyul Amr, those who are invested in power, the guardian, the custodian of the Muslim Ummah. If you go against them, then you have gone against the precepts of Islam. This kind of justification, which unfortunately is accepted in some circles, brings about many questions of how much animosity they still have in today's world. That same animosity that existed during the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where Jabir ibn Abdullah al-Ansari narrates, if we wanted to know the munafiq from the mu'min, we would know so whenever Ali ibn Abi Talib was to walk into a room. If someone's face got happy, then he would be a mu'min. If someone's face became frowned and grumpy and angry, then that's obvious that that person would be a munafiq. And this continued on. That legacy of hating Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam continued on and exists with us today. Manifested in the likes of Al-Qaeda, Jabhatul Nusra, ISIS, all of these different groups, Jama'ah Islamiyya, all of these different groups that are popping up. We're not surprised. The followers of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam for hundreds of years have been persecuted, have been killed, since the very early years of Islam. This is the suffering that we have gone through. Such a gathering like this in some countries is as dangerous as you not knowing if you're going to go back home. You would have no idea. There is no guarantee that you are going to go back home. So you need to be proud that you are able to participate in these gatherings. The question is, if circumstances changed and you didn't have a police station across the road and you didn't have this level of security, would you still want to go? Would you, like as we know in the history of Islam, give your hand as a sacrifice just for the sake of doing ziyarah for Imam Hussein? Many of us might say, yeah, of course we would. But when the going gets tough, sometimes the tough doesn't get going. This is why it's easy for us to say it verbally, but we don't know that if circumstances were to change, whether or not we would have that same level of loyalty and allegiance. We need to be tested.
We can't be tested only in 10 days. We need to be tested in the whole year. If we were to have this same program commemorating Imam Hussein alayhi salam outside of Ashra Muharram, put your hand up and tell me how many of you would be absolutely confident that we would have that same enthusiasm that's happening around Sydney or anywhere else. Highly unlikely. Highly unlikely. Muharram is that special occasion, and of course, as I mentioned on the first night, this is something that is very honorable for us. We know the value of Muharram, but outside of Muharram, where is the value of what it is that you stand for? He said, this Qari came, once there was not enough place for him to walk from the back of the masjid to the front so he can recite what it is that he was reciting for that night. They had to make a way for him from the back door so he can come to the front. The next night, when he walked in from the back, the back door of the masjid, the front door of the masjid, he saw that he was easily able to walk through all the way to the front, and he recited what he did. Then he said to the brothers, "What's happening? What's going on?" They said, "Oh, well, there's a soccer game tonight, so majority of people are at home." And this is the reality, and this is something that we deal with regularly. There are so many occasions outside of Muharram al-Haram where we beg people to come and participate, and yet they still find excuses not to. Imam Hussein alayhi salam, when we speak about this takhalluq bi akhlaqillah, when we say, like as Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi said, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has 99 names. Those who implement the 99 names will enter heaven. This is what we are referring to when we speak about akhlaq of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and why we can say that if we were to sum the whole purpose of sending down Anbiya into one word, we would say akhlaq. Now, when we understand this, and we understand the whole purpose of why it is that Imam Hussein alayhi salam took that effort of explaining why it is that he is doing, we know that it was for the sake of building that ideal society. An ideal society can only be achieved if you know that this is the objective for life. This is why we live. This is why we were created. This is the whole purpose of us being on this earth. Do you remember when I spoke about you being the Khalifa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that you represent God in your conduct, in your behavior, and you need to make sure that you manifest the sifat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in how you present yourself, whether it be you adopting good traits, or whether it be you relinquishing, abandoning, staying away from bad traits. It comes down to hubb dunya, to loving of dunya. And that is, as the hadith says, رَأْسُ كُلِّ خَطِئَةٍ. It is the capital, the basis of all wrong, love of dunya, love of this worldly affairs. Does that mean that we should abandon dunya and become hermits? Does that mean that we should empty our pockets and no longer pursue any kind of financial gains? No, money is good. Who said that money is bad? That dunyawi obsession to money is bad. Anyone that says that they don't like money is a chadhab, is a liar. Everyone likes money. Someone came to Imam As-Sadiq alayhi salam and said that I have a problem, and the problem is that I like money, Imam Sadiq Salamullahi alayhi said, what do you use this money for? He said, well, alhamdulillah, I use it for Hajj pilgrimage, I use it to assist people in marriage, I use it for this, I use it for that. Imam Sadiq alayhi salam said, well, that's wonderful. That's a very good thing. You're earning halal rizq, you are doing your wajibat, you're also doing a little bit extra your mustahabbat. That's wonderful. This is why we live in this dunya like as if we are going to be living we work for this dunya like as if we are going to be living forever, and we work for the akhirah like as if we are going to die tomorrow. That's why the hadith says, whenever you want to pray, you pray the salat of a muwaddi'. What does muwaddi' mean? Saying farewell, bidding farewell, like as if this is going to be your last salah. You have no idea if you're going to be able to pray again. You have no idea what's going to happen to you. There are so many things in our society, within the Shia community, that really needs to be changed. We have wrong attitudes towards some things, and they really need to be changed. They can't be changed if we stay in our old ways. Many people ask about the philosophy of qisma and nasib when it comes to marriage. Marriage is the biggest hurdle and obstacle in our communities today. Everyone's complaining about not being able to get married. Well, if you didn't have that many demands, then marriage would be easy. If you didn't want a $5,000 photographer and a $2,000 cake and a $25,000 reception hall and this and that, of course marriage would be easy. You are the one that is making marriage difficult. Any person that says, well, alhamdulillah, I don't have any demands, but straight away say, Khuda Hafiz, I'm leaving you. Because that but always comes up with a very long list